Even though the presentation says August 9th, I promise you we did update it. It is Friday the 13th, so let's hope that today is a lucky day, not unlucky, in this presentation and Zoom call. So WastewaterSCAN, as you all know, is a national effort based at Stanford to build a national network for wastewater surveillance using consistent methods. We have Marlene and I as the program directors. You guys might also know Amanda, who helps a lot with all the website and data and support. And you maybe got emails from her as well. Our national scaling partners include Verily, who's our contracted laboratory, National League of Cities, and of course, all of you are partners at the wastewater treatment plants in public health. Next slide. Right, for the program overview, we currently work with 148 plants across the country, representing about 12% of the US population within 40 states. Next slide. Here are the pathogens that we currently monitor. There's nothing really to point out here that's new, except I do want to emphasize that we are currently detecting 4 different targets related to influenza A, B, and then the subtype markers H1, H3, and H5. And we have our controls here, the bovine coronavirus and PMMOV. And then there's already been a question about Mpox. We measure Mpox clade 2 using a clade 2 specific assay, which targets the Mpox that has been confirmed to be circulating in the United States for the last couple years. Next slide. So this project is based on having very open science. So all of our work is in the public domain. We have peer-reviewed papers that describe our protocols and methods, and also the logic for scaling different assays, evidence showing that their concentrations in wastewater are related to more traditional clinical measures of the diseases. And also all of our protocols are on protocols.io in a step-by-step format to allow people to easily replicate those methods. You can scan the QR codes when this is sent out for access to these. Next slide. As I mentioned, all of our papers, as well as some fact sheets, are publicly available. Our newest open access papers are listed here. One is on Candida auris in wastewater, and another is on the H5 assay, and it's showing the proof of concept and the science to support scaling it across the US. And then Amanda has worked really hard on this, this sort of description or blog of WastewaterSCAN published body of work that describes all of our peer-reviewed papers, organized by topic and themes, so that you don't have to read the papers, but you can read high-level summaries of them, which may be more accessible. At our next stakeholder call, we'll likely have a few more papers here listed under new, because we have some papers that are pending acceptance right now that will be coming out in the next couple weeks. Next slide. So I'm going to go over some of the H5 detection in municipal wastewater to date. So we started prospectively monitoring in mid-May 2024 for H5 across all the WastewaterSCAN sites. These results shown here is a heat map showing the presence or absence of H5 in all the sites that have had at least one positive detection since we started monitoring. So blue indicates a sample was collected and it was negative, and red means a sample was collected and was positive for the H5 marker. Dates are on the at the bottom. So to date, we have processed over 8,000 samples for the H5 marker, and we've had just 99 positive out of those. And those 99 have been detected at 29 WastewaterSCAN sites. And they're listed there where the cursor was. And so this is a map showing locations where states where we have detected the marker at least once. And then you can see that we have a list here of the states with confirmed H5N1 in livestock. And the ones shown in red here are sites where we have detected the H5 marker, and sites where, well, I'm going to let Amanda present this because she made this. Go ahead, Amanda.
So the way this is split up is sites where we are actively monitoring in are in this top half, and then we don't monitor in New Mexico, Oklahoma, or Wyoming.
Okay, great. So we can go ahead and move on then to the next slide where, okay, so we also have this FAQ where we provide some guidance for how to interpret positive H5 detections. My understanding is that CDC now also has a fact sheet, and that some states like California have their own fact sheet to help support some of the interpretation of the data, which they are very happy to share. Next slide. I'm going to hand it off to Marlene now.
Okay, hi everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a new study that we have going on antimicrobial resistance genes in wastewater. There are two main questions that are motivating this research, which is, first of all, how are clinically relevant antibiotic resistant genes, or ARGs, distributed across the United States when looking at wastewater? And then the second question is, what characteristics are associated with the abundance of these ARGs in the wastewater in a sewer shed? So some of those characteristics that we're thinking about are density of animal feeding operations, hospitals, pharmaceutical manufacturing, rates of antibiotic consumption, a lot of different factors that you may think would drive the presence of antibiotic resistance genes in the population and in the wastewater. For this study, what we've done is taken samples from WastewaterSCAN. We're working with samples that are from 1 week at the end of May to get this national snapshot of what's going on with all of these different ARGs. These are the different antibiotic resistance genes that we're measuring. And this is some preliminary data showing the distribution of each of these targets. You can see on the x-axis here, we have all of those different targets. And then on the y-axis, we have the concentration, and all these individual dots are all of the sites around the country. And you can see what the distribution is for each of them and how it varies quite a bit, depending on what target we're looking at. But there's a lot of similarities between the sites across the country in terms of the overall concentrations that we're seeing. So the goal is to get this national picture of what's going on with these ARGs, and then look at some of the characteristics that may be associated with the concentrations in wastewater. So this is cross-sectional data. Like I said, this is from a week at the end of May, not focused on individual locations and wastewater treatment plants, but focused on these larger patterns across the country. And we're doing this work in collaboration with Dr. Susie Kim, who many of you may know because she was a PhD student at Stanford and has been working with WastewaterSCAN since the very beginning, and is now a postdoc at UC Berkeley, and Professor Amy Pickering at Berkeley, who's an expert on antibiotic resistance and has done a lot of work in wastewater monitoring, among other things. So they're both on the call today. So we're all happy to answer questions about this. And Susie made that beautiful plot that you saw on the previous slide. So it's been a great opportunity for us to work in close collaboration with them on this. And we'll be sharing more information about it as kind of the analysis continues, but wanted to give you an update and opportunity to answer any questions. I'm going to move ahead now, though, to talk a bit about the Mpox assay. I know there was already a question about that. So we are conducting some research and development right now to test an Mpox clade 1 assay. This is our overview of how, many of you have seen this many times before. This is the overview of how we evaluate things to add into the WastewaterSCAN program. So beginning with knowing that we have something new we want to look out for, and in this case, making the decision that Mpox clade 1 is worth and important to look at specifically in wastewater at this time, using software software to design primers and probes, or choosing an assay that's appropriate and checking for specificity against sequences that are out there, procuring primers and probes and positive control material. We've made it this far in the process. We have all the materials, and where we're at right now is testing the assay specificity and sensitivity to make sure that it will perform well in wastewater. After we've completed that, then we will move into the next steps of deciding whether this will actually be deployed. And so we are very excited to hear your comments and feedback on this process. One thing I know that's been pointed out about this before, and that's really important to note, is that Mpox Clade 1 is a select agent. We have talked with CDC, and we are working closely on making sure that we have all of the appropriate procedures set up to handle the reporting, the things that go along with testing for something that is a select agent. Another important thing to note is that we've worked with CDC and confirmed that in terms of the samples, there are not implications of a select agent positive for the utilities. That's considered the virus's natural environment. So even if we are testing for a select agent like Clade 1 and it is identified in the wastewater, that does not put any additional restrictions on the utilities or the origin of that sample. So we're happy to follow up with more details. Also happy for everyone to also contact CDC and ask for more information about this. But we're in the process of working on this right now. We want to hear your feedback and comments, and then we will hopefully have the opportunity to include Mpox in our Clade 1 testing in the near future. All of the data that we're generating right now for Mpox is Clade 2, as Ali already described. So any of our current detections that we see for Mpox are Clade 1, are not Clade 2, are Clade 2, I'm so sorry, are Clade 2 and are not Clade 1. So this will give us the opportunity to distinguish the two. Just briefly on the assay choice. So, we are using a CDC Clade 2 assay, the Clade 1 assay that goes along with that, that's reported in the paper that came from. It does not work against the current Clade 1 that is circulating. And so we are testing out this assay, which is a newly reported assay. It will include Clade 1, both A and B, but it's accounting for the recent variability in the Mpox Clade 1 genome that impacted the performance of that other assay. So we are confirming that this works well, and also continuing to look at new sequences that are reported to make sure that we can interpret what clades and that will actually be included in the assay. So we'll give you more updates on this as we go along, but we want to let you know where we are in the process and that we're working on it and answer any of your questions. And Amanda just put the link to this assay choice in the chat, so you can take a closer look at it there. And I will now turn it over to Amanda.
Thank you, Marlene. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly go over the wastewater categorizations for as of today, as of Friday, September 13th. So just a reminder, the categorization system is based on trends, levels, and frequency. And in the chat, I just added a link to the methodology. Next slide. So as a quick reminder, we have 3 archetypes for our categorizations. We have pathogens that are commonly detected. We have seasonal pathogens and pathogens that are not commonly detected. So commonly detected regardless of season, SARS-CoV-2, norovirus, rotavirus. Seasonal pathogens are influenza A and B, RSV, and human metapneumovirus. And pathogens that are not commonly detected regardless of season is Mpox, EVD68, C. auris, and Hep A. Next slide. So I'm going to go through the current categories. Next slide. So right now, we are in the high category for SARS-CoV-2. Even though we're not seeing a statistically significant trend in the last 21 days, levels are still rather high across the whole country. For influenza A, B, and RSV and human metapneumovirus, we are not in seasonal onset yet for our wastewater categorization system, so we are in the low category. Influenza A, we only have 5 sites across the whole country that have hit that onset threshold, several of which are in the Bay Area. For influenza B, no sites are in onset, and we've had an 18% detection rate over the last 21 days. For RSV, no sites are in seasonal onset, and we've only had a 2% detection rate in the last 21 days. For human metapneumovirus, similar to RSV, only a 2% detection rate in the last 21 days. Interestingly, EVD68 is now in the medium category. Over the last 10 days, greater than 50% of the samples have had positive detections. And so that's jumped it up from a low categorization, which it's been at since we started monitoring, to a medium categorization. For neurovirus and rotavirus, we are both in the medium category. And lastly, for Mpox, C. auris, and Hep A, we are all in the low category due to very few positive detections. Next slide. So here's a quick overview for SARS-CoV-2. As I said, we're in the high category, and that is due to high concentrations, but no statistically significant trend in the last 21 days. We've started to see the medium concentration go down over the last several months, but we still have a 99% detection rate of SARS-CoV-2 in the wastewater. On the right-hand side of the screen, you will see the aggregated trend lines by region and nationally. So national line is in the black, Northeast is in the green, South is in the kind of yellow lime green color, Midwest is in red, and West is in blue. We are going to go over this at the end, but these plots are now available on the website, and Marlene is going to do a quick demo of that at the end. Next slide. For sequencing, we have data through September 7th, and we are still seeing the KP variants make up over 50% of what we are finding in our national aggregated sequencing data. Next slide. So here's just a high-level summary of the categories as of this morning. So we have over 45% of sites are still in that high category. So 68 sites are in this high category, 42 are in the medium category, 24 are in the low category, and 14 do not have a current categorization because they don't have enough data in the last 10 days for a categorization. And just as a reminder, this map and the data on the website is constantly being updated as soon as we have data from the lab, which is ingested multiple times per day. So this is probably going to look a little different than when you go on later today when we have more data from the lab. Next. So as I mentioned, EVD68 is in the medium category, and this is the first time since we started to monitoring last September that it has gone into the medium categorization. As you can see here, in the last 21 days, we've had 71% detection rate for all samples measured across the country. In July, this was only a 40% detection rate. So we've seen a pretty significant increase in detection across the country. Similar to the SARS-CoV-2 map, we have the national trend line in black, Northeast in green, South in this lime green color, Midwest in red, and West in blue. And here you can see the South is significantly higher than the other lines that we're seeing. And they started to see an uptick in positive detections starting to happen in late March. In the Midwest and Northeast, this happened in the middle of June. And then the West, it started to see an uptick in early July. And so we're going to continue to keep an eye on this data as we go into respiratory season. Next slide. And just a quick categorization map overview. No sites are in the high category, but 106 out of the 148 sites are in the medium category. So that means at each of these sites in the last 10 days, they've had more than 50% of their sites have a positive detection for EVD68. Next slide. I believe I'm handing it off to Marlene now.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a quick demo of what this looks like on the dashboard, and then you'll have these slides so you can refer to it. But we have this new view that is a regional overview, and you just saw Amanda present these plots. So you already are oriented to what they look like and what they represent, but this is what they will look like when they pop up on the website. As you can see, there's the key up here that shows the national in black and then the 4 different regions. All of this is the PMMOV normalized, aggregated trend data across each of those regions and then nationally, and just gives you that really nice overview of what's happening overall. So the way that you, so first of all, you can change the time period on this. So if you want to see the last 2 years, you can do so. If you want to see the last 6 months, get a little more zoomed in, you can do that. So you can adjust the time. And you can also download this view as a PDF. If you scroll, you'll see that in here is included SARS-CoV-2, RSV, influenza A and B, human metapneumovirus, EVD68, norovirus, and rotavirus. So those are going to all be part of the package when you download this PDF. The way you get to this is if you're looking at the regions up here, there's this little button that is new that says regional trends. If you click on that, this view will pop up and then you can play with it from there. So that is hopefully pretty simple to navigate and makes the data a little bit easier to see for all of the different regions and in comparison to each other. And I think that that's it for today. And we have some time for questions. Feel free to type in the chat or raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask.
I have a question. So we are restarting our WastewaterSCAN program, and so we're looking at 3 of the markers. And I'm just wondering, based on kind of your view of the data, which ones would you recommend for us to do, as you spoke about, kind of the seasonal variations and the non-seasonal variations, and then as well as this mpox? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Amber, can you remind me what jurisdiction you're from?
South Orange County. So we're in California.
Yeah. I think, we have a lot of data on our site that can hopefully be helpful in looking at some of these regional trends and overviews of what's happening in different places that can help you evaluate what data is going to likely be most useful to you. That's a lot of the purpose of our program, is to provide this information and what that monitoring looks like in real time to help make those decisions for different programs about what to monitor. But I would say it's obviously a very individual decision depending on what kind of the public health priorities and other are within your jurisdiction. But we're happy to answer questions about how we generate the data for these different targets and how, and connect you to others who might have opinions on the use of the mpox data, for example. And I know that CDPH has a lot of support that they can provide too.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll call on Richard McMullen from Arkansas. Sorry, don't mean to put you on the spot, but you had the first question in the chat before we started, and I just wanted to check if you had additional questions about mpox.
No, you answered it. I try to keep track of so many different folks doing so many different things, and well done. Thank you. You do a great job, folks.
Thank you so much. Glad we were able to answer your question.
Just make a comment about the mpox stuff as well. So I've been working with Anna Marota at WEF, and she's been talking, I know, to CDC as well. And so I think they've been pretty consistent that mpox in wastewater is in its natural environment. So there's no additional restrictions or requirements. But they recently did say that split samples, if like say a utility takes an influence sample and sends part of it off to get analyzed for wastewater surveillance and uses the other part, that if that wastewater surveillance sample tests positive for clade 1, that there would be requirements then for the split sample. And we're still talking to them to try and get clarification on what the implications would be. But I just wanted to point out that there are some possible implications. But like I said, still working out entirely what all of those are.
Yeah, thank you, Naoko. And like I said, we're in the process of evaluating the assay right now and making plans for the possible addition of Clade 1. So we will make sure that we help with any guidance that needs to be passed on to partners about these critical issues, if and when we start that testing. And so we'll continue to be talking to Naoko and others. But so please again, whether you speak up now or not, or send us an email, let us know your thoughts. We always want to hear everybody's thoughts about these changes to the program.
There's a question in the chat from Colleen. She has two questions. First, we have done research on dengue in West Nile, and we're not planning to scale those nationally at the present time. And the policy isn't in the national environment. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but we did.
Well, I think just polio is handled distinctly from the select agent program. And so you could refer to CDC for more information about that. But the way that polio is classified and handled is different from other select agents.
Sorry, I had like a piece of dust on my screen and I thought polio said Pollock. And I was like, I thought it was policy. So sorry, I have to clean my computer.
Yeah, polio is its own beast. We do. We have a publication. We can share links on.
We have a preprint on West Nile and a peer-reviewed publication on dengue. Amber, so we we submit all the data generated by WastewaterSCAN to news for targets that they currently accept in news, and that's how some of these efforts are folded into the national surveillance program. As you know, news collects data from a lot of different programs around the country and aggregates them to display on the CDC website.
I just put the link to the dengue paper in the chat.